Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Cosmic Pulse, another episode of Astrological Handicapping. Or we are in the middle of the Del Mar race that's happening at in San Diego. And I'm here with my co-host Luke Bayley and another fellow astrologer and handicapper, Robert Giarratano. So, Luke, do you want to share the chart? We're going to be looking at race 8, which is $7 million. That's happening Eastern Daylight Time on Saturday, November the 2nd, 2024. And Luke is going to share the chart.
So thanks, Jen. This is the chart of the race for the Breeders' Cup, and as you can see, we are on a particular day which is quite important in the state of the world. We have a major election going on at a similar time, and the most important aspect that's really showing up is this big Pluto, I should say, opposition. And one of the things that's making that particular aspect even stronger is they are the co-rulers of the sign of Scorpio, where both the sun and the moon reside at the moment for the race. So that actually has a very strong influence over the nature or the outcomes of the chart for itself for the day. This is actually for the whole day, not necessarily just for this race. Now, where it becomes tricky, and I would throw a disclaimer out there to say that I do believe that this is probably one of the hardest races we're going to have to pick, and even on this whole day. It's not going to be very easy to pick winners. And for the viewers out there, I'll explain why. And the reason is this. You've got a planet here at 29 degrees and 29 degrees. Now, very close to 29 degrees, 45 and 33 is 0. Okay, so it's by aspect in a lovely sextile aspect to Mercury. It's also aspecting Moon. The moon is aspecting Neptune at 27. The moon is also opposing Uranus at 25. And you've got Jupiter over here, which is not within that aspect, but it's also closely in opposition to Venus. So what we have is a whole heap of planetary energies that are bouncing off each other, is pretty much how I would put it. And while they're doing that, it's very hard to determine which planetary energy is going to have more influence over the other. So this is going to be a very interesting race to try and pick. If we really wanted to, I think, Jen and Robert and myself, just before the race, we were having a bit of a chuckle saying, yeah, we've all narrowed it down to 10 out of 14. That could
If I can,
potentially, that could
if I can
potentially be.
add a
Yes.
little story, Luke, your theory, which I've tested recently when I was at the Kyoto racetrack in Japan, when
Mhm.
there wasn't any of the big players of Mars, Uranus, Saturn, or Jupiter on the midheaven,
Which is
you
this part of
said
the chart. Yep.
that it's usually the favorites that are favored.
Yes. So this will be interesting. Now, Jen, this is where I'm going to throw the spanner in because you're exactly right. And I would go down that path. And I probably still will at the end of the day after analyzing this. However, we do have a very strong moon, which is the dispositing ruler of Mars and therefore very strong, opposing Uranus. And Uranus oppositions or Uranus aspects often throw that whole theory into the wind, where all of a sudden we have one that's out of the blue that you wouldn't expect is the winner. Now, the underlying factor to that one is that aspect from the moon to Uranus and from the Mars to Pluto and all of these are not actually physically aspecting the midheaven degree. So therefore, that's what makes this even harder to pick. But we will go through very quickly. When this happens, I always look at, the ruler of the midheaven being Jupiter, and Jupiter is in Gemini, and Gemini is ruled by Mercury, which is in Sagittarius. So therefore, the ruler of Sagittarius is Jupiter. So we can turn around and see straight away that the dispositing ruler of the midheaven is Jupiter itself. Jupiter is opposing Venus, and Jupiter doesn't have any sort of major aspects to others, but it is in aspect to a number of planets via midpoint and degree. That's where it becomes interesting as well. So if we look at the whole thing with Jupiter itself, it's in its detriment. It's not very strong. So we've got planets in not very strong positions. Mars in Cancer is in its fall. The moon in Scorpio is in its fall, and they're in what we call mutual reception. Mars is in the ruling sign of the moon, and moon is in the ruling sign of Mars. The only planet out of the whole lot that's actually in its rulership is Neptune. And Neptune brings into these particular aspects. And I think that's going to have, whether we like it or not, a major influence over the outcome. So what we find here is we're looking at major planetary patterns. And the interesting pattern that I see is that this Neptune is trining not only Mercury and the moon, it is trining Mars, and Mars is opposing Pluto, and these Neptune is sextiling Pluto and both of these two. So what we find is this is what we call a kite formation. So it forms like a kite across the chart, which usually means the energies are pushed out through the top of the kite, which is Pluto in Capricorn. So this is going to be a very interesting one to pick. But what I'll do is I'll hand over to Jen or Robert, Robert, you should go through the midpoints of the chart and show this on the dial if you like. So I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll let Robert have a closer look at the midpoints and share your screen there, and we can talk about how all of those planets come into play in the planetary angles.
Can you see my hi everyone? Can you see my the wheel?
We certainly can.
Okay. So if we go to the start of the race, which is the midheaven here at 12 degrees of Sagittarius, we see some planetary pictures coming into play here, specifically the Neptune with Uranus and the Moon, and also a tight conjunction or a square to Saturn to that midheaven. Also, there's a connection with Zeus, and it's a wide, kind of like a wide connection here with Zeus, along with Mars and Pluto. So I'm going to look at two things. I look at the meridian, and also I like to look at the ascendant also, because to me, those two, the ascendant and the midheaven in astrology, have a great bearing on circumstances at the moment. When I look at the ascendant here, what I see here is kind of like a little more, not as tight as the meridian, but there is a connection with Kronos, along with,
Is that the vertex?
well, then the Mercury is coming to the ascendant. But to me, I think that the meridian is stronger for the time of the race. So based on that particular situation, earlier today in the other Breeders' Cup race on Friday, at the time of this race, a horse won by the name of
Magnum Force.
Magnum Force.
Like a gun, Magnum.
And it, to me, of all the horses that ran in that race, that name kind of like was very conducive to this particular chart with the Saturn and the Meridian. I think it the price it paid. It wasn't a long shot, but it did win the race. And looking at this particular situation here, I tend to kind of like, should I give what I think my picks are right now, or?
Not just yet. We're going to give Jen a chance to have a bit of a chat with.
Okay, and also on this meridian, you have Jupiter and Meadows, and
what does Nido stand for? What does it represent?
It's a trans-Neptunian planet. It basically is the stillness. It's a quagmire. It can be stuck in a position. It's the beginning of time. It can also indicate death.
Okay, so it has a very
But
Pluto
sometimes
Saturn
it's sometimes like you're stuck in a limbo or you're in a tight situation.
Okay.
But with Jupiter there, it can bring a little more of just of a kind of like more of a wisdom type of connection with, to kind of like, it's like, I mean, gladly spent money. I mean, you're happy to spend money or, gains out of raw materials, things like that. It could also indicate a standstill of currency market where, there is like a quagmire. It could be losses, no income, or expenditures can be coming to a stop. But it also can be lucky with raw materials. So you look at some horses' names that they kind of like form with a raw material, that could be a hint.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's basically what I have to say with the midpoint structure at the time of this race.
All right. Can you
Robert, you also had the dial pointing to Neptune.
Yes, I was about to say that. Can you throw that dial on Neptune and we'll see what it's triggering because being the only planet in rulership.
Okay, well, the big thing over here with the Neptune, you do have Chiron with Meadows, but you have a picture that's a little wide picture, but you have the Uranus along with the Mars Pluto coming in. So, that could indicate, transform some sort of transmutations or, developments that kind of happen very suddenly. And with that Neptune there, it can be, something that you don't really see at the moment, but the results come in later. So it's a surprise. But also at the time of the race, you see the moon is opposing Uranus. So that would indicate to me that the public is like very hyper, very anxious, kind of like very a lot of restless feelings going on, or just they could be very a lot of energy. I mean, like a sudden surprise. that could
Yeah.
also go on.
That's very Mars, Uranus, Pluto. It's like
Right.
sudden endings, sudden change, and also the dissolution of with that Neptune. So the dissolving. I,
And then when you look at Neptune, you look at institutions or things that have to deal with imagination, anything dealing with illusion, movies, situations,
prisons,
medicine. These are little hints of
hospitals,
Neptune. Anything
prisons.
with water comes into play. Also escapism, in institutions.
Yes, totally agree. Well, that's an interesting one. Jen, would you like to jump and give us an indication? Robert, if you stop sharing your screen, Jen, you're going to take us through some of the fixed stars, aren't you?
Share my screen that shows the fixed stars. Basically, as sharing my screen, there are two fixed stars that are
We're still waiting for your screen. Here we go.
okay.
You got a lot
Sorry
on
about
there.
so this is, can you see that clearly? Is
Yeah,
that big enough?
as clear as we can because we're not used to using your chart setup, but it looks pretty good.
Okay. So I'm trying to make it bigger, but if you can see down below here, we see that Rastaban is within 3 minutes of the MC. And Rastaban is in the constellation of Drago. And basically, according to David Cochrane's write-up and Ptolemy, it's of Saturn, Mars, and the description is Drago gives an artistic, emotional, yet somber, a penetrating and analytical mind, much travel, and many friends. So I'm adding Jupiter in there. And then, even closer by 2 minutes on the IC is another fixed star by the name of Talbot in the constellation of Orion. And it is the eyes of, Rastaban are the eyes of the dragon or in Drago. And Talbot is in the constellation of Orion, and it is of Jupiter and Saturn. Ptolemy says it to give a strong and dignified nature, so that would be Saturn, self-confidence, arrogance. Jupiter, inconsistency, could be Neptune, violence, impiety. Mars, and prosperity and trade, particularly by voyages abroad. So I'm going to stop that share.
Yep.
And I'm going to share the form and the astrological significations, but just to summarize what planetary significations both you, Luke, and Robert have mentioned are we're looking for a horses that whose names are associated with Pluto, Mars, Jupiter, Neptune, Uranus, and potentially Venus.
And
And so
Neptune. Yes, you said Neptune. Yep.
So what we're going to do now is we're going to quickly share our picks, and then we're going to go over the planetary significations, which are the astrological arguments or rationale for our picks. So I've highlighted horse 9, which is fierceness, because we all agree that it's going to win. We're calling the winner
Well,
because,
I'm on the ball.
okay,
I'm on the
so,
fence, but yes,
okay, all
I'm
right.
pretty. I
But
reckon it's going to be in the top three. I'm
okay, all right.
still deciding.
Okay.
I've changed my mind every two
All right.
seconds.
So but at the beginning, before we recorded in
I
our little
said fierceness.
preamble,
Absolutely. Yeah.
we were at one point, all three of
All in
us,
agreement. Yes.
in agreement with
Agreed.
fierceness. And I want to reiterate because Luke's philosophy or theory is that when there's no major player like Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus on the midheaven, which is what we have in the chart that Luke showed at the beginning, it's the favorites who are favored. And
Yeah.
so I am picking Fierceness and City of Troy to duke it out for 1 or 2. And then for 3, I have 5 choices. Horse 4, Mixto. Horse 6, Derma Sotogaki. Horse 14, Next. Horse 7, Ushba Tesoro. And Horse 11, Sierra Leone. So, and then Luke and Robert are going to make their picks, and then we're going to go through the horse name associations. So, Robert, do you want to go ahead and make your picks and
Blame
bets?
why?
I'm kind of like tending toward Fearness. It's just been in really good form. I also like Nex, and I like Sierra Leone, and also City of Troy. But if I was going to, my strongest feel is probably to do a really nice exacta box with the 9 horse Fearness along with Nex. The reason Nex is stepping up in class is he hasn't run against any grade 1 horses, but he's been running a lot of races, and he's been probably, I think, 10 out of 11. He won 10 races out of 11 in grade 2 and grade 3 races, but they're all been at distant races of 1.5 miles, 1.75 miles. This particular race is 1.25 miles. So he's got the stamina, and I noticed that a lot of horses seem to be closing on the track as I was watching the races today. And I know Sierra Leone has run against Fearness the last 2 races and come in second. And I know that Chad Brown is a very good trainer, so I'm sure he's going to have this horse pumped up. So if you want to cover yourself, I would do like a triple box with the 9, 14, and 11.
Okay.
And then
But I would probably key the 9 on top because I just feel, he's just too good of a horse lately.
I tend to agree on that. All right, so would you like mine now?
Yes, please, Luke.
I take a deep sighing breath as I do it. The interesting thing is, in the last, just so the viewers will know, yesterday I had a look at one particular race, and I looked at it and I went, you know what? Looking at how these things work together at blah, 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 the horse that's going to win this race is going to be this one and this one. And I got last and second last. So I came absolutely nowhere. And it forced me to look and go, okay, this is a classic example of following certain techniques and then being able to go, well, it might have worked, but it didn't work for this particular race. Now, why that happens is sometimes, as I said, it really comes down to the race will dependent on which planet seems to, at that moment, have more power. Picking that sometimes is really hard. So I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to say that I tend to agree with you both that Fierceness is possibly going to be the one to win. However, I also think that the City of Troy may also be the one to win. And then I'm going to throw another spanner in the works in a minute. So the reason I say City of Troy is because the City of Troy is not only was it a city, which gives that strong Jupiter, as you can see there, Jupiter, it was also a fort, which was Mars and Saturn. It's also old, so it throws at Mars. But the City of Troy had to be dug up. It was rediscovered, which means to excavate and to bring out of the ground is Pluto, and to uncover it, which is that Mars-Pluto. But also the City of Troy is well famous for the fact that, it was the Trojan horse that took over the City of Troy and took it over, which gives it a very strong Neptunian flavor. And remembering Neptune is the only planet in its rulership. And I saw yesterday races running where there was no sort of connections to the midheaven, and Neptune came through fairly strong, even though it shouldn't have. It did. Why? I believe is because it's a strong planet on the day. So that's why I said I was a little bit not too sure, and possibly I'd pick City of Troy over Fierceness. However, I really struggle to get a third place, fourth place, but I would nearly say equally to just after those two, I'd be going with what Robert said, either Sierra Leone or Next, and the other one was Derma Sotogake. These horses tend to be either running really well or they're trained to try and win this race, and that's what Derma Sotogake represents. And Derma Sotogake is, it's Mars. It's because Sotogake means like a hip throw in judo or the sumos. And that's very much a Jupiterian thing, which don't forget that Jupiter is the disposer of the midheaven. But there's one other horse that throws, and I'm going to throw this in, that may just blow us all out of the water for whatever reason, and that's Forever Young. So if for example, the Mercury, because Mercury is, it's moved into Sagittarius. It's in a very strong position. It's at the top of that kite formation. It's pretty close to the midheaven. It's pretty close to the moon. It's also something that's a little bit out of whack, but also that horse has been running really, really well in grade races from what I can see. So if I had to really pick, I would probably, me personally, because it's such a difficult race, I would go with a trifecta, but back 4 horses. And that's what I'd do. I'd cheat. And I'd probably go with Fierceness and City of Troy and then throw in a couple of other options. Forever Young, Sierra Leone, I think they're very close. But if you went with Derma Sotogake and it gets a place, then you're going to get a nice trifecta because it's 20 to 1. So it really is a tough one. I don't like the idea of having to pick a winner in this one, but we've got to do it. That's part of what we promised everyone. And I think you'd be neck for neck, personally, between City of Troy and Fierceness. The reason I hesitate on top of it, and I will say one other thing, was, like I said, that Moon is still in opposition to Uranus, and that tends to throw horses that aren't expected to win. And that works against Fierceness and City of Troy, which are my picks. So there's still that element of me going, yeah, I'm not sure, 100%. So, and something like, did you say Mixto? Is that what you
Yes,
said?
I did. I said
It's another one that, if you were after some, oh, look, I'm just going to back something for a win and a place, Mixto might be a great one. Because look, even if it comes a place, you're going to make some money at 30 to 1. So, and it sits in that whole sort of Neptune, Uranus, and to some degree Jupiter. It's also a tequila. And I've seen these Neptune horses just happen to get up simply because it's the only planet in a powerful position at the moment by rulership. So it's a tough one. By astrological sense, Mars, Pluto should win out the day, and that's Fierceness or City of Troy. But definitely Fierceness is probably your strongest one. But I don't like putting my hand on anything and saying, yeah, this is going to win. This is a tough one. That's my.
Well, just to verify what you said about, with nothing, you can't really put your hands on like one particular horse, but then if you look at the planet Neptune, a horse that ran today called Tequila and Therapy, it was a very Neptunian horse,
Yep.
paid $33 to win.
There you go. And there's a classic example of that coming out of the blue. And once again, and now with this moon, look, the other thing is, remember, the moon, if the moon was approaching Uranus for this race, so if we looked at the chart again, you'll see that the moon's just past it. It's moving away. I'll share it again now. If you look at the chart here, the moon is at 26 degrees and it's just past Uranus, but it's very close to it, but it has moved past at the beginning of the race. If that was approaching it, I would be like, well, that's definitely going to have more influence. It still has a strong influence, but it's just past. And this is what makes it, to me, a near impossibility to pick the winner. The interesting point, though, have a think about it, is the next aspect the moon is going to make is to Neptune. So it's going to trigger Neptune next. And that's what makes me go, well, I'm not sure about this race. These are by far the most powerful influence, but they're not by degree hitting that midheaven. They're not cracking it.
But I'm going to honor those 6 stars. We've got Rastaban.
Yeah.
That is 3 minutes away from that midheaven in Drago, which is your Pluto. Ptolemy didn't mention Pluto, but Saturn and Mars.
Yes.
And Mars has those connotations. Pluto does. And then on the MC, by 2 minutes, we have Talbot, which is of Jupiter and Saturn. So to recap, we have those energies or horse names that we're looking for: Pluto, Mars, which are already in the Pluto-Mars opposition. So I think the fixed stars are going to focus those energies because they are so close by like 3 minutes.
So Jen, I'll jump in there and say that's why I picked City of Troy over Fierceness, because what you just said with those fixed stars earlier, that's what made me change my mind for everyone to know. Because I thought if they're the only thing that would really change that is if the race was delayed, if it started late and they moved away.
And we are using this time in the program that was released yesterday. So sometimes, we're not sure how much lag, if this race is going, and if it's by, 3 or 4 minutes, we're changing.
It changes everything.
By one degree.
So you see that Moon Uranus opposition? It's creating an easy opposition to Neptune. Neptune's also trining this, and Mars and Pluto are creating an easy opposition to Neptune. That's the whole idea of the kite. Normally it's pushed out through Pluto, but what you said about those fixed stars was that the one on the midheaven is associated to Pluto. So we're talking about Pluto. Yeah, so Saturn. It's about, or probably Saturn. But if you put in Pluto, Saturn, Mars, and Jupiter, Jupiter's a city. Pluto is digging up or, excavation and bringing it all to the surface. Saturn and Mars is a fortress. And it's also Troy, which is a boy's name, which is Mars. And it was won, and it's known for its deception to being able to take over the city. It brings all the energies in together. That's why I chose it over fierceness, which is purely really a Mars Pluto, and it's somewhat to the sun, some of the strength of the sun in that. So it's I see it's a little bit up in the air, but what a great chart to have to analyze, and let's hope we can inspire a few people to pick a winner of their own accord. But I'd love, after we put this Cosmic Pulse up, it will be on the YouTube channel. I want people to comment. I want people to tell us if they won or what they picked and what they got and if they took anything from here. That's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see get a few comments come back and see if anything that you guys did. If you're an astrologer, even better. If you're an astrologer and you need to comment or contact us and say, hey, from my observations, you missed X, Y, and Z. We're out to learn. That's the whole point. And that's what I love about astrology. We all have can see different things. I'll explain one other thing to people that was very interesting. When we sat down today, just prior to getting onto this podcast, there's the horse in the race that Robert likes called Next. And Next, if you tried to give that an astrological meaning, it's very difficult to do because, we can say Troy is a boy's name and boy is a Mars. It's, you can put that together fairly simply. Now, my interpretation of Next when I tried to work it out was Jupiter. Why? Because to me, Next is, and it can be taken in different forms, that Jupiter is, I'm about to transition or I'm going to expand. I'm going to go to the next level, taking on or taking further my journey. But then Robert said, no, it's Mars Pluto, because in order to be next, something's got to finish, which is Pluto, and something's got to begin, which is Mars. And it's that transition between the two. And Jen, what did you say it was?
I put Uranus, and I just want to reiterate, Next was also one of my picks for the three, for the third place. Yeah, so I did 4, 6, 14, 7, and 11, which pretty much covers a lot of, I think we overlap in some of those.
Yes, I get it.
I think the only one that Robert mentioned, or maybe Luke, was Forever Young.
That's what I mentioned, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Forever Young, why I picked that as a possibility is because sometimes you just don't know what planet is going to be thrown back as the strongest part or the influence over or winner over the chart. And I just see that Mercury, if you think about it, is high in the chart. It's not really close enough to the moon to be of influence, but the moon is approaching it, which means it's going to give it strength. However, it's also aspecting all of these planets. So it's aspecting Pluto and Mars quite strongly. It's aspecting the Neptune, and it's also still in amongst it, conjunct the moon and opposing Uranus. So it's brought into all of these things, and it's also the ruler of the dispositing ruler of the midheaven. So you never know. Sometimes with the change of sign into Sagittarius, it can have influence. However, it is in its detriment. And I find that planets in detriment sometimes fail to perform. And that's why I didn't say it. But I said, I put my hand up and I go, be interesting to see. I just wanted to say the other side of the analogy that I've got. But, my winners, my picks are pretty much City of Troy to Pip Fierceness, and then one of either Sierra Leone, Dermis Sotogaki, and Next is more likely to be one of the next three, in order, that type of thing. And you may want to throw in, Mixto as an option. You may want to throw in Newgate as an option. You may want to throw in Forever Young as an option. They're all outsiders that could just upset the apple cart, in my eyes.
Can I just make another comment on the chart also?
What's that? Sorry?
You have to look at.
Pardon, Robert?
If you just look at the chart, what's really approaching the midheaven is Venus there.
Yes, exactly. That's right.
And it's opposing
Jupiter.
Uranus.
It's opposing Jupiter.
Jupiter's retrograde, so it's coming closer to that contact with that Venus Jupiter opposition. Which is basically, like a lot of joy, rapture, spending money or just happiness. It's the legal process. It's also well-balanced finances and things like that. So I look at, what horse would you suggest would kind of like fall into that Venus-Jupiter opposition?
That's another good one. The Venus-Jupiter opposition, in what I'm looking at, I would probably, let me just check. I'm just going back over a few things here. I don't really see
I mean, I think maybe Sierra Leone could have a little flavor of that, along with, I guess, what Tappet, you have what Tappet,
Yeah, Tappet Trice was what I was just looking at because Trice is to happen quickly, and Tappet, believe it or not, it can mean it's a kind of women's garment. It can be literally it's known as a tappet is a women's garment in some countries, and also a carpet. And both of those are very Venusian. So it's and to do something trice is like to do it quickly. It's like and tappet can also be quick. Let's just tap tap. So I saw it as Venus Mars with Mercury more so than Jupiter, and that's why I didn't really include that in what you just discussed. But look, at the end of the day, I don't believe in this particular race there is a strongly Venus Jupiter horse. That's why I didn't really put that into the picture personally. That's what I thought.
Also, I'd like to tell everyone out there watching the broadcast that basically this has been, well, Luke and I have been doing this for about 2, 3 years, so it's just been a constant learning process
An
of
actual fact,
assimilating
an
all
actual
these
fact,
different
4 years,
situations.
Robert. 4 years.
Okay, 4 years.
I went back to 2020. I realized our
Right,
first Breeders' Cup was
exactly.
2020. Yeah.
But it's been a lot of fun, and there's always someone's going to win the race, so that's what makes it more, I guess, challenging and trying to pick winners.
Yeah.
So
Well,
good luck
Robert,
to everyone out there.
Robert and I
And
sort of what we do, Jen, is I throw a few dollars over there to Robert and I say, here, good luck. And because he's got the experience with the horses. And in the past number of years in this Breeders' Cup season and on this particular day, he'll go for a pick 6 or a pick 4 or a pick 5. And we've just missed a couple of times. And when we're talking about that, I think one of our pick 6s have been like 4 winners and 2 seconds. And it's like, there's no cigar for that.
And meanwhile, if
I
he had to pick six, it would have paid like over $1 million. So,
Yeah, so we've
and the
come pretty
horses that
close.
came in second probably weren't favorites. So,
Yeah,
but we're
that's right.
close. We're having fun.
We're
Everyone
not
made it.
quite there yet, but
I've been doing this with you guys for I think 2 years because I think Robert reached out to me.
about 2 years ago. Yeah,
Yes.
that'd be about right. All right. Well, look.
Something else to consider quickly
Yeah.
is declination. So I think it's interesting because some of the planets that we also mentioned are in contraparallel and parallel. So if we look down here, Mars and Jupiter are in contraparallel with the MC, but Mercury is in parallel with the MC, and so is the moon. So that we didn't really talk about those considerations.
Yeah.
Moon is also in contraparallel with Jupiter, but it's in parallel with Pluto.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
we will find out the results
Tomorrow.
tomorrow.
So I better get on and start editing this video and put it up there for everyone to see.
Okay, great. Well, thanks everyone.
Yeah. All
That
right. Well,
concludes
you can
Cosmic.
stop sharing there for a sec, Jen, and we will stop the recording. And hopefully, as I said, please feel free to add your comments, add your information, tell us how you go, and tell me if this has been of benefit or in between or just confused you a little bit more.
That
I'll
concludes
stop the.
our
Bye,
episode.
everyone. See you later.